word that these guys invented, and it's one of the very few things that Kansas has done right. is they invented the word populist. These guys on a train one day in 1891, they were traveling between Kansas City and Topeka, and they were trying to come up with a nickname for supporters of this brand new third-party movement that they had just started, and that was sort of tearing through Kansas like a prairie fire at the time. And the word was populist, and then populism followed shortly thereafter. And you know how this word is abused now. For God's sakes, just before I dialed you guys up on my computer, I was watching a documentary where, about the Trump years, and whoever is narrating the documentary is talking about how dreadful it is that we're in a populist moment, and what he means by that is that we're in a racist moment.
Yeah.
Every time I see, and look, I seek these things out in order to write about them, but it makes me so mad.
Yeah.
Because when I was your age, I didn't know a whole lot about the nuts and bolts of populism, the details of it, but I knew it existed, and then I knew it was on the left, and I knew it wasn't like a racist movement. I knew that when I was a teenager. Everybody in Kansas does, or not everybody. I take that back. They often, you find that they don't know that, but I don't even remember where I learned about it, but it was anyhow. Populism was this left-wing political phenomenon in the 1890s, and Kansas was its best state. This is the state where they went farthest. They had, I think, 2 governors of the state were populists. They had U.S. senators, members of Congress. They dominated the legislature for a while. They did all those things. They caught on in other states as well: Texas, Nebraska, all over the place. Oklahoma, which wasn't a state yet, but anyhow, they had but all over the South, all over the plains, Idaho, Colorado, all over the place in the West. Only part of the country where they didn't catch on was the Northeast. And
funny how that works.
Yeah. And now it's, of course, everything's the other way around, right? They're always lecturing us, right? Anyhow, that was populism. And the word today is just so, it's abused so widely that it kind of drove me crazy. It's why I wound up having to write this book, sort of setting the record straight, and also asking, how did this happen? How did this word that was so noble, and a fine Jeffersonian word, how did this come to mean something so dreadful? It's a good question.
Mm-hmm.
Anyhow, so that's what the book is about.
It seems somewhat of an international effort too, because it's not just here in America where populist movements are demonized as racist or xenophobic. Also,
it's mainly a European usage.
Yeah, and especially
what
we saw with
the word was invented in America. It's an American word. It's not Latin. It is Kansan, and I discovered what you just mentioned, that this is how they use it in Europe in the year I think it was the year 2000. So I had just written a book. I used to throw the word populism around a lot, but always to mean a variation on the real deal.
Yeah.
Maybe I was a little too open-handed about it, and I would use it a little too indiscriminately. But I knew what it actually meant. I knew what it really meant. And I knew that these other, there were other movements that are like fake versions of that, which is what Trumpism is, by the way. But anyhow, I remember I was at an academic conference in Europe in the year 2000, and I had just put out this book, One Marketer to God. You mentioned it before.
Yeah, I've got it right here.
It's good if you're into the 1990s, which is pretty much before your time, right?
I was born in 98.
Okay, so that's when I was writing it. Anyhow, there was this kind of phony populism that was everywhere in the culture at the time, like always talking about markets as the voice of the people, and markets were like going to achieve equality, and all of this kind
sort of like West Wing logic.
Yeah, but it was I hate to say this, but it was slightly more subtle. I mean, I'm talking about like business culture, business propaganda. So I would watch. This is when CNBC got started, and I would watch CNBC all the time, and this is where I got all these ideas from. Anyhow, so I was at this academic conference in Europe, and I was talking about what I called market populism, this version of this fake populism, where they would claim that markets were the ally of the working class, and all this crazy nonsense, right? And that markets were going to empower the little people and all of this stuff. And I noticed at this conference, I was the only one there that knew what populism actually was. And they were all using the word as a synonym for racist demagogue. And I was like, that's really weird. But I was a very polite young man back then. And so I didn't really say anything about that, but it grew and grew and grew, and then that European definition somehow got transplanted back to America just here in the last 10 years.
Well, probably because of Brexit in part, which was
exactly Brexit and Trump.
Yeah.
But it's all of these European scholars who now teach here in America, and this is how they use the word. And now it's been adopted by both, the two leading newspapers of America, the New York Times and the Washington Post, and that's exclusively how they use it. And it's just, it absolutely drives me crazy. So that's why I had to write this book. How the hell did this happen?
Well, it seems like you've been writing about, at least broadly, the populist moment for a while. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, in What's the Matter with Kansas, you talk about William Jennings Bryan and the populist movement then as well.
Well,
And
it's who we are. Populism gets at who we are, not just as people from Kansas are. It's in their blood. It's in our, but it's also Americans.
Mm-hmm.
It's who we are, even if we don't know anything about it. It's so essential to how we understand ourselves and our culture. And okay, but keep going. I'm sorry I interrupted.
No, not at all. What I was just getting at was the fact that you seem to have been largely successful in your effort to reintroduce this into the conversation. You look at people from our generation. I mean, Gavin and I thoughtlessly made our Twitter bio a progressive populist podcast. That's kind of how we view ourselves.
There's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with that.
Right. And I think largely that's because of the writing that you've done. You look at, shows like Rising, which are tremendously popular, and, people have mixed opinions on the framework of left and right wing populism. And, you can have valid criticisms of horseshoe theory, but I think that it shows largely that this is a new positive reception, that there's a reclamation process of this term populism, which I think you have, a lot of credit to take for.
Oh, well, that's very nice of you. What's funny is a reclamation project is exactly right. But it's, I'm having a lot of trouble with this book. Well, it came out in COVID time.
Mm-hmm.
And I have not been able to sort of punch my way through into the mainstream of the sort of national conversation this time, as I have always been able to do in the past. This time I'm not, and I really don't understand why. Because, like you just said, this is a book that it's timely, and it's about something that everybody is saying, a word that's on everybody's lips, and it presents a kind of counterintuitive way of, it's calling us back to something that we all know is true. I mean, everybody knows in their heart that this stuff is true, and it's calling us back to that, to that path of righteousness. But for whatever reason, the message of this book is really disturbing to, and I hate to say this, but mainstream media. Yeah. When I was younger, I swore I would never use that phrase, but it's like, because it's so imprecise, but it's.
It's threatening to the corporate rule, right? This plutocracy of,
there's something about this, about talking about this part of our history, that is really disturbing. And there's all kinds of books that have come out just here in the last 4 years, in the era of Trump. I described some of them in the last chapter of the book. Revisit history of progressivism. There's a whole genre of this. Mm-hmm. And this is an old genre. I mean, historians have been doing this for a long time, but there's a new kind of on it. And this new take never mentions populism, and never mentions the labor movement, and never mentions economic protest in general. And that's really strange. But that's where we are now. And so it's very difficult for people who consider themselves, even people who consider themselves on the left, to talk about this stuff. It's uncomfortable for them.